And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. It's once again the fantastic podcast, Doctors,
but not doctors.
And we have had an interesting week, as I'm sure you have had as well.
Yeah, no, we've had quite the interesting week, both at home and abroad, and we're here to bring a little bit of it to you.
Exactly. Because if there's one thing that I think our audience is united on, Chris, it's the fact that they don't spend enough time thinking about the existential nightmare that is the modern world.
Yeah, no, the what's happening in the world today would be great if it was a movie and I knew that there was an ending to it that was a happy ending, or at least if it was a bad ending.
Structure, or at least, where there are baddies, they have a plan. There's a plan.
A middle, beginning, and an end, if you will.
Exactly.
It would be great to know that there was some kind of plan or end to this, but we're not there. We're not there at all.
We are where we are.
We are where we are, and and so we're just going to have to hope for the best. And speaking of hoping for the best,
is it something that rhymes with hope, Chris?
Something that rhymes with hope, and something that it speaks to me, not because of my religion, because I'm not Catholic, but because I'm from Chicago, just like the new Pope.
Hey-o!
Yes, the Pope.
Yeah.
Behold and take note that America's first Pope is from Chicago and not Boston.
Now, Chris, let us be careful here. You said America's first Pope, but let us not forget that Papa Francesco, Jorge Bergoglio, was in fact from South America.
Yeah.
So technically, he would have been the first American Pope.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the concept of the I am from the American continent or from North or South America, but we're from the country that has America in the name.
Oh, you mean in the sense of America?
The United States of America. So there's only one way to refer to an American outside of dickhead is an American.
Okay.
Because Bergoglio was Argentinian, right?
Yeah.
See how I did that? He's Argentinian. Yeah. So he is a South American, which I'm happy to say. He's a South American and the first North American Pope, but the first Pope that was born in the United States of America, which is a pretty big deal, given that I think the Catholic Church had been around probably for 700 years before America had even been founded.
Oh, no, I think you'll find it's more like 1,700 years.
Oh, that's right, 1,700 years.
Oh, yes, they cast their laws back to St. Peter, who famously the first Pope, famously died on a crucifix upside down.
Yeesh.
In Rome. Yeah, the Romans were not the Romans were not having it. This whole new Christianity business, at least until they decided they were having nothing but the Christianity business under Constantine.
Which then makes the current Catholic Church one of the last pieces of the old Roman Empire.
I mean,
isn't that weird?
No, interestingly, there was actually a book I read not too long ago.
Big surprise there.
Yeah, well, hey-o. And it was basically making the argument that there were a variety of attempted successors to the Roman Empire, right? Attempts to recreate it, at least in the West, right?
Yeah.
And this goes from Odovacar, I think, to Justinian, tries to reclaim the Western Roman Empire and ends up doing really well before it all goes to shit, thanks to, a massive plague. Which is still called the Justinian plague, because that's I know it was not.
That's how I knew the name.
It was not great. You have Charlemagne, right?
Charles de Rosa.
Yeah, Carlos de Rosa. Who creates the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't particularly work either. But there is the argument that the papacy ends up being like the last vestige of an attempt to recreate that kind of political unity, and it can only happen not through politics, but through religion. So yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I mean, so we should probably name the Pope, who is now Leo the 14th.
And that is an interesting name, Chris. I think that's worth digging into a little bit. You know why he's chosen the name of Leo the 14th?
I do, but our listeners may not. So please carry on.
Well, as it happens, he is deliberately tying himself to the previous Leo the 13th. You'll be surprised to learn, who was Pope during the end of the 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah.
And he's very famous in Catholic circles because he wrote or promulgated, let us say, an encyclical called De Rerum Novarum.
Wow.
Of the new things.
Right.
And basically, this was him sort of getting the church more or less in line with the modern world. This was him basically saying, okay, so democracy is fine. We're okay with democracy. You can totally be a democracy and be Catholic. It's fine. It's fine. Trade unions.
Good they got on board with that.
They're fine. You can totally be a member of a trade union and a Catholic. Not a problem. So like this is the beginning of sort of Catholic social teaching. The idea that like it matters what happens to poor people. It matters that governments sort of have some semblance of doing right by the people that they represent. I'm not saying that this made the church nice and cuddly forever, because, everything that literally happened afterwards. But I would say it was a really big step in terms of the church ceasing to be a fundamentally medieval institution and starting to sort of join the modern world.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I haven't heard that in that detail, but I do know that this Pope, the last Pope Leo, Pope Leo the 13th, was the Pope during the turn of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s, and basically more or less pro-worker.
Oh, yeah. Certainly the most pro-worker Pope that Catholicism had ever seen, I would say, certainly during the modern era, and probably the most pro-worker Pope afterwards until Papa Francesco. So our North American, our Chicagoan Pope is currently still named Robert Francis, either Prevost or Prevost, or I think it's I'm going to say Prevost, but that's because I've been in Britain for far too long.
I'm going to say Prevost.
Okay.
And he's from the south side of Chicago.
I say the Pope.
Yeah, no. And unfortunately, he's from the south side of Chicago, which means he's a Sox fan. I had about a day of thinking that he was a Cubs fan, which is, unfortunately for me, the Sox tend to get the most famous supporters like Barack Obama and now the effing Pope.
Yeah, that's that. What is it about that? What is the deal there, man? Is this like a Yankees-Mets situation where all like the aristocrats support the Yankees and then everyone who hates the Yankees supports the Mets? Or?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Okay. I mean, the North Siders are seen as rich kids and the South Siders are seen as the real people. I would disagree that we're not all rich. Some of us are wealthy. So
duly noted.
Well, I'm neither, but yeah. So, other good points about the Pope, Pope Leo the 14th. He's actually spent a lot of time in Peru and Spanish. He speaks fluent Spanish,
in fact,
Italian.
He's a naturalized citizen of Peru.
He is a Peruvian citizen as well. So that's Peru having their first Pope, probably having their first Pope as well.
Yeah.
So
he's a real twofer.
Yeah. Everybody gets something with him, and there is a rumor that he was elected because he's the least American of the American popes, if you see what I'm saying.
Well, it is interesting. I will say this. He was elected on the second day. And that is stunningly fast.
That was surprising.
Right?
I didn't think that was going to happen.
Yeah, well, no, and once again, those smartasses who, before every papal conclave, will say, the one thing you can take for granted is that whoever's walking in as the favorite won't get it. And they have been right. They have been right every freaking time.
Absolutely.
It's super annoying. But yeah, that's an interesting fact. But so I will also say this.
Yeah.
Apparently, Pope Francis appointed the majority of the cardinals who were in the college.
Yes.
And
80%.
Well, I did not hear that. Please say that again.
80%.
Wow, that is a stonkingly large majority of cardinals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he expanded them as well. He expanded where they came from.
Wow. Nice. He did a lot of good work. Like, I'm not going to say he was perfect because nobody is, but, Pope Francis,
He knew what he was doing, and he was setting the system up very well. And of course, I think we should end on this high note. MAGA hate him.
Oh, yeah.
MAGA hate him. They think the woke, leftist, Marxist Pope.
Yeah. Yeah. You can tell he's a Marxist because he thinks that immigrants are humans.
I know. This is a weird feeling an idea that I guess is now Catholic, that immigrants are people.
Yeah, right.
Which is...
where did they get that crazy idea?
I think we really must disabuse ourselves of this idea that there are not intervention in the world.
I really have to say, this is one of the things that I think really points out just how far to the right MAGA has swung. That the Catholic Church, compared to them, is a bastion of social justice and Marxism.
Yeah, like exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's the bloody Pope, right? So I'm just saying, this guy is not going to walk around saying that women should be priests and walk around butt naked. This is still the Pope. He's still a Catholic priest.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right?
He's still going to be deeply disappointing on LGBTQ issues.
Yeah.
Maybe there's talk about maybe having female deacons, Chris.
Female deacons.
Female deacons.
2025.
I know it. Yeah.
2025.
So they can continue doing literally all the work of the church on the ground, but some of them will get a fancy title. Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. So a little bit of hope for our lady Catholics out there.
Fingers crossed.
You might be a deacon. I don't even know what that truly means.
It's sort of like basically like an unordained assistant to the priest. So you help with the celebration of the mass.
You'd be up there next to the table.
Yeah,
and stuff,
you're up
with
there.
The cloth
you're up there. You got the spotlight on you, but you're not leading the mass.
Right.
You're kind of helping with the mass, but it's teamwork makes the dream work, Chris.
Great. So and next up, let's talk about every week we discuss due process things happening in America concerning blah 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 happening in America, things that would be covered by Bob Loblaw.
Indeed, in his Bob Loblaw blog.
Bob Loblaw's law blog. And but this week kind of threw us for a curve because noted fascist in chief Stephen Miller is now coming out with a genius plan. I'm sure he thinks on top of Mount Ignorance. Call back to last week on suspending habeas corpus. And anyone who thinks this is a good idea is deeply, deeply wrong.
I think we could say that objectively, that they're just factually incorrect that this would be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely factually incorrect that any good would come from this, because habeas corpus is kind of the cornerstone of our protections. And it comes all the way back to common law, comes all the way back to here in London. It's so much of what we do, so much of what we believe our rights are, kind of are centered around this concept. Anyways, Patrick, why don't you talk us through the basics and what's going on?
I would be delighted.
Yeah, and then we can, see how it goes.
All right. So I guess first things first, for those of you who are not up on your medieval legal Latin, habeas corpus is the phrase that we give to the idea that if the government arrests you, that you have the right to force them to put up or shut up. Basically, say what it is that you've been arrested for, say what charges you are facing, and then the government has to provide some basic level of evidence that their charges have some weight. So this isn't to say then that the government can arrest anyone unless it has perfect proof that they have committed a crime, because that would be, just super hard to actually do for everybody all the time forever. But it does mean that you have the right to challenge your arrest, to challenge your detention, and if the government is not in a position to show to a judge that it does have reasonable grounds for suspecting you of a crime, and that it plans to be bringing those charges before the courts, then basically they have to let you go. Now, why is this important? Because basically, think about what the world is like if the government never has to show that. It would mean that they could take anybody off the street that they wanted to take off the street and then put them in prison, and then that would be the end of that. In other words, habeas corpus is literally the protection that we have against being disappeared.
Yeah, that's and I think we need to just think about that for a second. We come from, whether you live in the United Kingdom, the United States, or anywhere in between, you do not fear being disappeared. You don't fear, if your loved ones are going to come home that night, or your loved ones don't fear if you're not going to come home, because the government has effectively decided that you are no longer useful to them.
Yeah. And the thing is, this isn't to say that the United States doesn't have a long history of, using law enforcement in ways that are, occasionally quite violent and
illegal.
And not too unoften unjust as well. But it is to say that there's always been this foundational idea that, the government can't just toss you in a hole and throw away the key and then that's that. they do have to, at some point, go before the judge to say, all right, well, here's the evidence, here's what we're saying, and yes, we will be bringing them to trial for this. So it's interesting that Stephen Miller, noted lizard person, is talking about getting rid of habeas corpus, specifically in the context of if the judges keep ruling against them.
Yeah.
Which is wild. Wild on a host of reasons. And because this is a podcast, I'm going to share those reasons with you.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I know. Chris is he's just bouncing up and down with excitement.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
So you are. You are. But okay, so it's worth talking about where habeas corpus even exists in the American constitutional system. So for those of you with their pocket constitutions, if you'll pull them right out and you go to Article 1.
Article 1,
Section 9,
Woo!
Clause 2.
Put a link in the description.
Indeed. You will find written what I here say. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended, unless when in case of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Now, you may notice that that's written to say that you can't get rid of habeas corpus unless there's a rebellion or an invasion, and the public safety may require it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a few steps you have to even talk about being able to revoke habeas corpus. Now, you may notice that the United States is currently not actually in the middle of a rebellion.
Yeah.
Also, it is not currently being invaded.
Yeah, despite what what MAGA might think.
Well, and it's a real indication to everybody that for the last 20 years, the right in the United States has consistently used the language of invasion to talk about illegal immigration.
Absolutely.
And this is why they've been doing it. To prepare the ground, to soften the ground up for being able to start saying, and that means we can start eliminating habeas corpus, and that means we can use the Alien Enemies Act, and that means we're no longer bound by law. And I think this is a real indication of how we should be very careful about how political rhetoric works.
Yes.
And that maybe we should be a little bit less willing to accept wild-ass, crazy statements by people whose do not have the country's best interests at heart. But that's just me.
That's just you.
I'm a weirdo like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's weird that he's even talking about this because
it's insane.
There's no constitutional support for this whatsoever. But my story gets better.
Oh, it gets better.
It does.
There's more. There's depth. There's depth to the story.
So here's the thing, right?
Woof.
I said that this was in Article 1 of the Constitution.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually super important because...
Because numbers matter.
Oh, yeah. Because Article 1 is where the Constitution lays out the powers of the Congress.
Legislature, yes.
Yes. Not the president, not the courts.
That's right.
Congress.
That's right.
And it's also in Section 9, which is also interesting because what are the other things Section 9 says? It says things like no bill of attainder or ex post facto law should be passed. No capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. No tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any states. It's a long list of what Congress cannot do.
Yeah.
So already we're in a situation where our Constitution is really clear. This is a power that the government cannot use. It is only the Congress that can do this, and only under very specific circumstances. So for noted discount Goebbels, Stephen Miller, to be talking about having the executive declare habeas corpus suspended is flatly unconstitutional, literally cannot happen legally. This is a call towards basically saying the Constitution no longer exists. This is a call towards dictatorship.
It's basically not even the opening gun to fascism. It's like that's when you finally put out your market stall and say we are fascists, we are authoritarians.
Yeah.
And this is what I've been noticing. I know you got a lot more, but this is what I've been noticing about the MAGA folk over the past several months, specifically the past several months, is that they keep on arguing the same point, and the core of their point is the president wants it done, therefore it should be done. That there is this not blind loyalty to whatever the president wants, and therefore it should be done. And if you have an issue with it, doesn't matter if there's a law against it, doesn't matter if they have no proof, it doesn't matter if they're wrong. If the president wills it, it must be done. Yeah. Which is what fascism is.
Well, that's the thing. That is not that's not the kind of thing you could say in a democratic republic.
No.
That's not the kind of thing you could say in a constitutional monarchy.
No.
That's the kind of thing you can only say in absolute dictatorship.
Or absolute monarchies.
Well, exactly, right? I mean, I don't know. I've always wondered what's the difference between an absolute dictatorship and an absolute monarchy, other than the latter has more bling.
I think there might be a more legitimate or a slightly more powerful court or legislature that's able to advise the king or the monarch, whereas and this has been proven that the legislatures of authoritarian states are rubber stamps. They are talking shops. Their committees might be able to do a lot, but the effect of the legislature is nil.
Yeah. So if you're looking for some political reform coming from the Chinese People's Congress, yeah, maybe find a better way to spend your time.
Look elsewhere for that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Elsewhere. Yeah. But yeah, so this is it's incredibly disturbing to me that so many people in the United States. A lot of people are turning against Trump. The polling is really not good for him right now.
Yeah, that's clear.
Large numbers of people, it seems, have started to realize that he does not have anyone's best interest at heart other than his own.
No.
And I think they're starting to realize that he, as we've been saying, he doesn't need them anymore.
That's right.
So what concerns them no longer matters.
A lot of people are also noting that they want him to follow the rules.
Yeah.
They want him to follow it. The president should follow federal judges' orders.
Yeah.
Right?
Huge supermajorities of America are quite clear. I think over 70% in the polls that I've seen that the president has to obey the rulings of the Supreme Court, obviously. I think it's over 80% for the Supreme Court, in fact.
Because a lot of those MAGA guys, whether you're fascist or whether you're just a supporter, they have the blinkers on, but they know the basics.
Yeah.
They know that why should the president or why should the government not have to follow the rules, but I have to follow the rules. And I think there's a smaller minority within that movement that says, I'm not going to follow the rules because when they take over fully, I'm going to be okay.
Right.
And I don't have to follow the rules because I'm wearing the Trump head lapel pin or the Kim family.
I am a member in good standing of the party.
I am a good exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is, right, that even though huge supermajorities again of the American people are clearly against the idea that the president could simply disobey the law and disobey the courts. And disobey the Constitution, 20% of America is down with this.
100% down with it.
Yeah. So 20% of America, they're. I mean, if you're willing to accept that idea, if you're willing to accept the idea of the president can ignore the law, full stop, then you have no business calling yourself a citizen of a democracy. Like you're what you are is basically a totalitarian who's just waiting for the right moment.
Yeah.
So that's disturbing that it's such a large percentage of America. I really hope that most of them just haven't really thought this through.
I think some of them have, but some of them, the people who think slavery should be back.
Yeah. Well, there's a chunk of them too. So that's fun. But yeah, so it's. I don't know. I hope that this is going to be a really clarifying moment. We're in a weird situation where, headless sock puppet Stephen Miller has put out this idea on Friday, and no one seems to have really reacted to it yet. I'm really hoping that Monday, everybody in the United States comes out of the woodwork and starts lighting up the phones and basically saying Miller has to go because you cannot have this. You just can't have this.
Yeah.
Like it's like if a member of the administration were caught, throwing out Hitler salutes at a. Oh no, that's sorry, that's happened. Sorry, or if it had been caught, having extreme right wing tattoos and whatnot, and leading. No.
Sorry.
Yep, damn it,
that's already there as well.
Yeah. Well, this is a bad thing, and it's really a situation where honestly, we really need to see a very large mobilization across a wide spectrum of the political chattering classes. I think that's a strict necessity at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, now we probably look at slightly different stuff online, but I know that in social media, that's where I first heard about it on Friday. It was on Instagram. And so,
okay.
Media's Touch got it, but also the Philip DeFranco show got it.
Yeah.
On his shorts. Basically, he pops up, he posts really quick, 2-minute things, and he tries to stay as neutral as possible. But in this case, he said, you know what?
Yep.
I can't be neutral on this. This is like dictator stuff. We can't get rid of habeas corpus.
Yep.
As soon as you suspend that, you don't get it back. And if you think it's only for immigrants, that is the hook. That's the hook that they always use. They are trying to take your stuff. So we need to get rid of all of the rules in order to go after them.
Exactly. We have to take away your rights so we can hurt those people, not you,
but
those people.
They never couch it in, these are your rights. They couch it in, we're taking away their rights. Mm-hmm. But in taking away their rights, they're taking away your rights as well.
Yeah.
And when Stephen Miller says we need to get rid of habeas corpus, so what? I guess we can kick more immigrants out of the country. Yeah, it's not specific. You don't say get rid of habeas corpus for Steve and John and and Elvin or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. That's the nature of rights. Rights are something that everyone has or no one has.
That's right.
Rights that don't apply to everybody are not rights, they are privileges.
Exactly.
And privileges can be revoked.
Yeah. And it's up to the person who issues the privilege to decide which privileges you will have.
Exactly. A fundamental rewriting of the very constitutional structure of the United States.
Oh, we wouldn't have a constitutional structure of the United States. We would have the will of the leader.
Yeah.
And that's another term for it is Führerprinzip.
Yes.
Which is whatever the leader believes is the law.
Because he is the incarnation of the folk.
He has the backing of the people. Whether or not that's true doesn't matter.
No, you misunderstand, Chris. See, the Führerprinzip doesn't say he has the backing of the people.
Oh.
The Führerprinzip says that the Führer is the people.
That's right.
He is the channeler of the people that exists out there in the ether and the actual people. Those schmucks.
Yeah.
They can be on board or not. It's fine. It does not matter. Because if they're against the leader, then they're against the people and therefore not part of the people. And therefore the only people who matter are the people who support the leader.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
This does not have a very long history in American political thought. I'm just going to put that out here.
Oh no, there's. I'm sure some crackpot's been writing about it in the Heritage Foundation, or somebody's been writing about it. Like we can come. We can find a way to take a scalpel to habeas corpus. But it's like going after your own heart or going after your own brain. Unless there's something wrong with it, then you need to fix it. But I mean, the system.
You don't go in for brain surgery just for fun.
Yeah,
like that's not what you do.
Yeah, and that's why you have to create the problem. And I'm not saying that there aren't immigrant criminals. There are, and they can be any color. For example, Trump apparently greenlit the introduction visas for like 53 Afrikaners.
Oh yes, that's right. He did bring in some refugees from Africa.
They're
just all white. That's
white Afrikaners. And I believe a plane was chartered for them to come over.
Oh my goodness!
Right, so
spending public money on refugees. Who is this woke Marxist?
I know, and I find it interesting that that these people aren't seen as an invasion, and these people aren't seen as a reason to get rid of habeas corpus. No. But the billions of people flowing over the southern border. Well, that's it. I mean, hell, from what I understand, basically it's nothing but brown faces from Texas all the way up to Montana.
Yeah, no, that's true.
You can hardly walk for the dangerous immigrant.
Exactly. No, it's true. You just walk down the street and you get immediately mugged by like 15 immigrant abuelas.
As you walk, as you sift through the billions upon billions, it's so hard for you to breathe.
I mean, some people say it's just it's just them smiling at you, but I like to think that that's really mugging.
The smiles with teeth. Is how they get you.
Exactly.
That's why we got to take
luring you in with a false sense of community, false sense of security, and with being human.
Yeah. So, I mean, so this is the thing about like what he said. I mean, over the past several weeks in this show, I mean, this is episode 13, I believe. We have been talking about how the government, the MAGA government, is trying to get rid of due process. Yeah. And we keep on saying the same thing. We'll have to continuously say the same thing until the end of this government, and we'll have to continue saying it provided this government ends forever. Is that first they come after the immigrants, they wait and they see how far they can go with that.
Yep.
This is how they're trying to push it again. So they went after due process. It's not working, but the MAGA administration saying screw it, we're going to keep moving forward. The next step is habeas corpus, right? So one way you can think about habeas corpus is one day the government, the police will kick down your door, they grab you, put you in a car, bag over your head. You wake up, you're in a helicopter, push you out of a helicopter, you're gone.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? It doesn't matter. because they don't have to prove a thing.
Yeah.
So,
that's the thing. Like, I think there's unfortunately a sort of belief that's sort of out there for a lot of people in the American political context that you can take away habeas corpus and the right to appear before a judge for just illegal immigrants, right?
Yeah.
That, like, those guys, right? You don't have to put them before a judge. Why would you do that? You could just expel them, clearly. But the whole point of going before the judge is to determine whether, in fact, you are an illegal immigrant in the first place. Because if they don't have to prove that, then illegal immigrant is just the label they attach to you before they do things to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can be an American citizen, and without the right to appeal to a judge, without the right to appear before a judge, you effectively have no rights if this goes through, as we've already seen with that case on the Georgia-Florida border. You know,
I'm blanking on that one.
This was an American citizen was driving in a car.
Oh, this one where they picked him up. That was in Tallahassee.
Was that in Tallahassee?
We talked about that.
Yeah. Well, Tallahassee's not that close to the border.
Tallahassee's close enough. Valdosta's a half hour away.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It may have happened on the Georgia-Florida border because the guy was pulled over and then then they dragged him in and then he proved that he was an American citizen and then they said, oh, wait, there's a Florida law that says none of your papers matter. And then eventually he was let go.
Well, yeah, because he was able to appear before a judge and the judge was able to say, well, he's a citizen, so why does Immigration and Customs Enforcement have him in custody? That's absurd. If he hadn't had the right to go before the judge, then he would most likely be in CCOT right now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Trump administration has made clear, once someone is in the torture prison, what can they do to get them out? How can they possibly get them out? I mean, they can't control El Salvador just because they're paying El Salvador to keep people locked up in the prison. That doesn't give them any leverage.
Exactly. So I mean, before we move on, I think it's important to note that America has a lot of issues. Most countries have issues, but America right now is in a pretty dark place. But the way our country is set up is very unique because it specifically designed to make what's happening very, very hard to complete.
That is true.
The Fifth Amendment, for example, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. It goes on to say things, but it says person. It doesn't say...
Doesn't say citizen.
It doesn't say citizen. The 14th Amendment does mention citizen, but this is about due process as well. But it also mentions persons. Because the 14th Amendment actually has several parts to it. So you'd have to get rid of parts 1 and 2, maybe 3. There are many barriers to actually trying to get us to a full authoritarian state. But the first one has been for now crossed, which is mollifying the legislature, which is the easiest way to deal with this. The Republicans they're sitting on their hands. They are putting their hands over their eyes. They're ignoring the braying masses in their town halls. They're doing everything they can to keep their jobs because they think that if I keep my eyes closed, my hands over my ears, these guys are just going to go away. And probably next week, we're going to have to talk about the Democrats. We're going to have to talk about the left, both in America and the UK. Because this is their moment to stand up. And some of them are, I'm going to say a lot of them are in different ways. In the US, less so in the UK. But this is the moment that, you're either on board with fascist America, where you can be arrested for no reason, where you can be thrown in jail and deported as an American citizen because the government either made a mistake or just doesn't like you.
Or just doesn't care that it made a mistake.
Or just doesn't care. So, and if you don't think it can't happen to you, it can, because Trump already has your vote. And once he has your vote, he doesn't need you anymore.
Exactly. So I think at this point, we probably want to, I do want to mention one other thread on this increasingly convoluted fabric that we're weaving here. Which is that the habeas corpus has actually been restricted previously in American history.
Indeed it has.
And it's actually...
What? Are we hypocrites now?
well, this is how you know that we're an honest, plain-speaking sort. We're not going to try to hide the ball on this. No, I think it's actually worth talking about this because I'm not going to bury the lead on this. It makes, Secret Reptilian Stephen Miller look even worse in retrospect, I would argue.
Great.
So, yeah, one of the times when this has happened, right, was specifically in the context of the American Civil War. Now, this is interesting. Abraham Lincoln, the president, suspended habeas corpus. Now, we just spent some time pointing out that that's unconstitutional, and it flat out is. The Constitution is quite clear. Congress has that power, but only in cases of invasion or rebellion and when public safety may require it. What's interesting about the Lincoln case is this. He suspends habeas corpus literally at the start of the Civil War when the rebellion is happening. So that part, check.
Right.
But what's also interesting is that Congress is not in session.
Right.
And Congress is not in a position to be called into session. And this is a flat-out emergency because, well, if you look at where Washington, D.C. is, and if you look at where Virginia is, literally the Confederacy was right there. And, well, there was not a hell of a lot of time to start dealing with things. So Lincoln finds himself in a position of either, as he put it, breaking this one part of the Constitution in order to preserve the rest of it, or upholding that part of the Constitution and seeing the whole thing collapse. In other words, he wasn't putting it in the sense of, I have this power, I can do this. He wasn't putting it in the sense of, well, in this emergency, I have the power to do this. What he's saying is, I have no power to do this, but this is an emergency, and this is a terrible situation. This is not good, but this is what has to happen. And it's also worth pointing out that the courts take real concern with this. Like, there are actually cases that come out of this. And in fact, there's one very famous case, basically, where the Confederate sympathizer basically is, well, yeah, he wasn't a great guy, but he is very much sort of locked up. He's locked up without charges. He doesn't have habeas corpus because that's been suspended. But nonetheless, he's able to get his case before a judge. And the judge finds that, once the emergency's over, the government doesn't have the power to do this.
Of course, right.
And whether the emergency exists or not, that's not something the president gets to decide. Again, this is a power that's given to Congress. So it's interesting that that happened then. And it was not costless, and it was not, legally speaking, fantastic. It may have been necessary, but it wasn't good. And we could see a similar situation with another time that it was dealt with, and that is Hawaii after the attack at Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And in fact, this one you may have heard a little bit more about simply because it ties into the fact that Hawaii was then run basically as a military government throughout the war. And it's also tied in to the creation of the concentration camps to put Japanese citizens and American citizens of Japanese descent to sort of, the claim was that this is a temporary situation to find out who's, potentially, who's a threat. And then they just sort of didn't bother deciding who was a threat. They just sort of kept them there. Interestingly enough, the case that ended up ending the concentration camps, that ruling came at the same time as the ruling on, I've forgotten the name of it. It's incredibly famous.
Korematsu?
Yes, Korematsu. Thank you.
Heyo.
Well done. Yeah, teaching the lawyer a thing or two. But so what this court said was that, yes, the government had the right to create that system, but it didn't have the right to hold people there without determining whether they're a threat. And basically the ruling says, you determine right now whether they're a threat, and everyone who's not, you let them go immediately. And that was the end of the concentration camp system, because, well, there just weren't any real threats there, basically.
And this is what's important. First off, judges were involved, and therefore the judges were able to determine the scope of the law. Yep. And these were two either invasions. So there was an insurrection.
Yeah.
And there was
flat-out rebellion.
A flat-out rebellion in the case of the Civil War, and a perceived invasion in the case of World War
Absolutely.
II.
Like, these are the strongest possible cases you could have for the suspension of habeas corpus.
And at least one of them is a bit dicey because you're just throwing American citizens into concentration camps.
Oh, yeah, 100%. It was, again, not good. It's not a good thing when it happens. Even if you claim it's necessary, you can't claim it's good.
And it can't be forever.
Yeah. And even in those cases, the strongest possible cases, the courts are still in a position to say, no.
So basically what we're saying is if somebody comes to your door and saying, do you believe that we shouldn't have habeas corpus? You should say, get the fuck off my doors.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
they're not your friend.
They're not your friend. And with that eloquent sign off, we're going to take a break and come back in just a second.
All right.
And we're back.
Welcome back. It's time to have a hard turn to the right as we... Well, actually, no, that's not even hard to... We're going from fascism to the Reform Party. So...
Reform UK.
Yeah, Reform UK. Yeah. So, like, is that a left turn?
It depends on how they feel that day, Patrick.
That's a good point. And so, because reform has been in the news, hasn't it, recently, Chris?
Yeah. So listen, since our last session, there were local elections in England, and Reform UK did very, very well at the expense of both the Conservative Party, but apparently the Labour Party as well. And so we've never really done a deep dive into reform, and we're not going to do a specific deep dive today. We're just going to talk about kind of the outcome from these last local elections. But before we do, the Reform Party is headed up by a man named Nigel Farage, who is now a member of Parliament. He is the head of the Reform Party. But you might know Nigel Farage as the person who used to be in charge of the Brexit Party, and he used to be in charge of UKIP. So he has been on the far right of British politics for probably the past 30 years. He was a member of the European Parliament while railing against the existence of the European Parliament, while also taking just fabulous amounts of money and expenses and salary from it. Yeah,
the expenses scandal, which rocked Parliament back around
2009.
Yeah, 2009. That didn't seem to really adhere so much to Nigel Farage and the people doing the exact same thing in the European Parliament.
Yeah, and also, as declaring my interest, I continue to work for the Scottish National Party Westminster Group. And something else that happened during those local elections, there was a by-election in Runcorn and Helsby. The former MP Mike Amesbury beat the hell out of somebody outside of a pub, and subsequently, over many months of trial, he lost his trial and resigned as an MP. And one day we'll have to discuss how MPs resign, because you don't resign, and you can't. But Mike Amesbury is no longer an MP, and obviously this is a big test for Keir Starmer and the Labour government. And they lost by 6 votes.
6 votes, Chris.
6 votes.
Sorry, do you mean 600 votes, Chris?
No, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people.
Wow.
So, 6 people either way, a 7th person, would have made a huge difference.
Yeah.
And this is one of those problems when you have the first past the post, you don't have proportional representation. So you have, there must have been, I think, 20 parties standing in this one election. And if I was Labour, I'd be raging, but also they may have seen this coming. Anyway, I am digressing.
Yeah.
So Reform won, as far as I know, 593 seats in the local election. So, and here's some more background. Councils in the United Kingdom, different parts of the United Kingdom are run by councils. These councils do things like manage your rubbish or garbage pickup. They manage basically how your local cities or towns or areas run. The further away you get from London, the bigger these councils become. They have, several seats in them, maybe, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 or more. More recently, there's been a huge scandal in a place called Birmingham, or Birmingham, if you're from America. Birmingham. And the effect of that is there was a strike by the garbage collectors, and I think they went on strike. They may still be on strike, and they just stopped picking up the trash, and it just got everywhere, and the whole town apparently smelled terrible. So
yeah, garbage strikes are not the kind of thing to mess around with.
They're not funny at all. They're not funny at all. So Reform was standing alongside Labour, the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, and so many other parties in these elections, and a bunch of independent parties, because these are local elections. But they basically have this big national surge right now. And that was being tested at the last elections on the 1st of May. As I said before, they won 593 seats. They got like 41%. Let me pick this up real quick.
Yeah.
41% of the vote.
Woof.
And I'm just checking here because I pulled it up and then I completely lost it. But they pulled up a massive percentage of the vote. In fact, they got more seats per vote than they should have gotten. But that's kind of the proportional system is never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But all in all, it's a huge night for them, and it's a huge victory for reform.
Yeah.
And other things to note is that they're winning in areas where the UKIP had a very strong showing. And this is interesting because UKIP came in second in over 100 constituencies in the 2015 general election. And the outcome of the 2015 general election was that there was going to be a referendum on the UK leaving the EU. So it's very important that, a lot of these councils kind of just basically started shifting towards reform because effectively they were already there. They've won 593 seats. They've won total control of 8 councils. A former government minister named Adrienne Jenkins, who is pretty infamous, she became the mayor of Lincolnshire. Greater Lincolnshire, and mayors here it's not the same as in America. They're different kind of powers, but they've already started saying things like they're banning all flags.
All non-official flags. Which means that if your locality supports Ukraine, you're not allowed to fly the Ukraine flag as a gesture of solidarity from any city property. Basically, that's effectively what that would mean. But really, what they're doing is they're trying to go after pride flags.
Yeah. So they're going after, but they're doing a lot of showcase performative politics, and they're gonna try and shut down hotels where refugees, asylum seekers are staying, and they're gonna try basically as an anti-immigration party, just like Trump. They're promising to punish the immigrants, and it's obviously a very, very big vote winner, especially when you leave London and you move out of what they call the home counties, let's say away from the University of Oxford and Cambridge, and keep on moving north and north and north, where there used to be an industrial belt. Yeah. And now,
until recently, these were very strong labor areas.
Yeah.
Labor being the traditional party of the center left, basically. So this is one of the bigger stories, I think, of the last 15 years of British politics, the sort of shift in Labour's basis of support much more towards London, towards cities, and away from the ex-industrial areas. But meanwhile, of course, we have a real question, I think, of exactly who's losing the most here. Because it's true that the Reform Party gained just a stonking number of seats, a huge number of seats. But what's interesting is who lost seats.
Yeah.
So if I can quote you from the BBC's election results.
Sure.
So according to them, Reform picked up 677 councillors in the election. The Conservative Party lost 674.
Yeah.
Which you might think means that, well, then just all the Conservative voters went for Reform Party, and that's what the story is. But that's not really quite true. Again, we have this problem that a lot of the sort of people voting Reform are people who used to vote Labour. Instead, what appears to have happened is that there was sort of a real split. The Conservative lost 2/3 of their councillors in those places under election. And for the record, this is not the entirety of the United Kingdom voting local elections. This is mostly sort of the Midlands, the North.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And so this is not representative of the entirety of the British electorate.
Yeah, local elections are staggered. So it's only a portion. So Labour still has the highest number of councillors, and Reform have the smallest number of councillors overall.
Yeah.
But they just happen to do very, very well in this round of local elections. And it's seen as a litmus test for the government. But now it's a litmus test for the entire British political system.
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah.
Because what's interesting here is that it's not just that the Conservatives lost 2/3 of the seats that they had controlled. It's that apparently there was a split in the Conservatives who split from the Conservatives, with some of them voting for reform and a bunch of them voting for the Liberal Democratic Party, which is sort of how would you describe the Liberal Democrats, Chris, ideologically?
The Lib Dems ideologically?
Yeah.
They're everything you want them to be when you want them to be them. The Lib Dems
during the election, they are whatever you want, buddy. It doesn't matter.
Well, the Lib Dems, in a European sense, fill the space in the middle. They were in coalition with the conservative government. They were in, but they have no issue being in party or working with Labour. They're mostly concerned right now about social care, local issues. They do very, very well locally. They can run very good local campaigns. Very good at looking at potholes and pointing at them, sadly.
Yep.
And that's kind of what they're known for.
Yeah.
But they don't have a big kind of single issue that can define them.
Yeah.
Which is their big issue. This is a problem. So and this is how I kind of talk about politics. Every big political party in the United Kingdom has that one thing you typically associate with them. For example, Labour Party, they're for the workers. The Conservative Party, they're for the rich. The SNP are for Scotland and Scottish independence. The Green Party is for the environment. The Lib Dems, I don't know. The Reform, screw the immigrants.
Yeah,
it's the anti-immigration party.
Yeah, the Lib Dems are a really kind of odd man out here, because you're right. They sort of they came about in, I think, what was it, the early 1980s, because the Labour Party split. The right wing of the Labour Party left. It was unhappy with the direction under Michael Foot. It was Michael Foot? I got it right?
I think so. Yeah, Michael Foot was definitely the leader during the 1980s.
Oh, I feel so happy about that. That's a feather in my cap. But yeah, so they were unhappy with the direction of the party under Michael Foot. They split and they joined the Liberal Party, who used to be for, I don't know, like 100 years? Chris?
Easily 100 years.
Yeah, like that
was the other party.
Well, that's the thing. It was the Tories, the Conservatives, and it was the Liberals. Yeah. And the Liberals were, from what I understand, like a bit of like the party of government for the 1800s. Like, and they were the party government during World War One. Yeah. David Lloyd George was their kind of one of their famous prime ministers. Yep.
There
was never another Liberal prime minister ever again.
Fun fact: Winston Churchill started off as a Liberal, turned to the Tories.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so, interesting cat, that Churchill brother.
Yeah.
But so, so the Lib Dems, they're the joining together of this centrist party that had been trending kind of sort of social liberal-ish, but then had its lunch eaten by the ascendant Labour Party. So it's this rump party that's sort of left over. It joins together with the right wing of the Labour Party. It looks like it's going to be the big new hotness, and then just sort of, doesn't really capitalize on that for the 80s, and then the 90s, and then the thousands, and then it was, I think, 2010 when it looked like for a little bit they were ahead in the polls. They were actually going to finally, right? Like they were finally coming into their own. They had positioned themselves as the left-wing alternative to Labour at that point, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the reasons why when they then joined a coalition with the Conservatives, and after having promising everyone, we will prevent any increase in student fees, once they got into power, they're like, actually, what we meant is we're going to triple them. That kind of shattered the party, and they're only now crawling their way back from that. They were down to 8 seats in Parliament?
They were down to 5 seats in Parliament.
5 seats?
That's when the Scottish National Party and I was there. That's why we got 56 seats. There's a big thing. Yeah. But basically, the Liberal Democrats are a combination of the Liberal Party and the Social Democratic Party. In 1987, I think in 1987, they kind of joined together. Maybe, don't quote me on the 87 part. But the point is that we're not here to talk about the Libs. We are here to talk about reform. And I think an important thing to think about is that there have been some polls that have come out. And the polls that have come out basically just seeing where people would vote, where they'd vote. And over the past several weeks, reform has been rising up. in the poll numbers, and they started off at like 20%, and all the kind of big parties, Labor, Conservatives, they were all kind of level pegging with each other. They're all like 20, 21, 22. Labor was kind of ahead, and then the Reform Party gained some momentum. But after this past election, they are now polling at 32%. The Labour Party is polling at 22%, the Conservatives at 19%, Lib Dems at 13%, the Greens at 9%. And polling at 32% is a kind of pivotal moment for me, because the Labour Party came into power on 33.4% of the vote.
Yeah.
So
and won a huge
400
majority.
seats. 400
seats.
seats.
Out of how many seats, Chris?
650.
Right. So that is that's almost a 2/3 majority for those of you who are not feeling like doing math at the moment. So that's just a massive majority on 33.4%, and then if Reform gets 32%, what could happen?
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk about to kind of to close this out. And just so I can still show my face in my office. In Scotland, Reform are rising as well, but the S&P are still on top. The last poll that I saw, the S&P were still on top at 33%, Reform at 19%, and they could theoretically become the main opposition party in Holyrood, the Scottish Parliament. But Labour and Reform are on level pegging right now, and the Conservatives and the Lib Dems are on level pegging at 11, and the Green Party is at 5, and I don't know where Alba and other parties are. But the important thing to note here is, like, for the UK as a whole, what we were just talking about before, this is why these two things are connected. You bring in a party that is anti-immigration. You bring in a party that says we're going to sort out the immigrants. We're going to make your life better by kicking them in the nuts, right? That's and people vote for that. Brexit was basically won on let's kick immigrants in the nuts and let's close our borders, and everything will be all Downton Abbey again.
Yeah. Warm beer and crickets.
Warm beer, cricket, and cold summers.
I mean, you still had the cold beer and the cold summers and the warm beer and the cricket. Yeah. Anyway, even with the immigrants, actually. So I don't know how that was going to solve.
They were on the streets, Patch. I could see them. But here's the issue. Is like, so I took a little dive into the last Reform Manifesto, and they want to do things like, I'm going to go in reverse order here.
You go for it.
They want to bring in proportional representation. No, that doesn't sound
really
bad, does it? No, they want to bring in proportional representation.
Yeah.
They want to reform the British broadcasting system.
What?
They want to reform the House of Lords.
Okay.
They want to replace the 2010 Equalities Act.
What?
They want to reform free speech, and they want to leave the European Convention on Human Rights.
Okay, which rights do they think we shouldn't have?
There it is. So here's the problem. We were just talking about habeas corpus. And in the United States, the reason that Stephen Miller can talk about this stuff, but we'll have a hard time changing it, is because there's courts, there's the Constitution. I mean, to actively try to do what he wants to do, or do what maybe Trump or MAGA wants to do, they don't have the legal right to do so.
Right. So for them to do it, they'd have to actively break the law, break the Constitution, and then I guess hope that the military backs them up on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
There is no Constitution in the United Kingdom. They only have constitutional acts. There is nothing entrenched, i.e., all laws can be easily changed.
Majority vote in the House of Commons, get it through the House of Lords, and have the King sign off.
And so when you have a manifesto, and if you ever read a manifesto and you're in the UK, go straight to the constitutional reform section. It's the least fun, but
probably the most important.
But it's the most important, because if you reform the House of Lords, then you can change how they need to approve the laws. And if it's in a manifesto, it doesn't matter anyway, because the Parliament Act will allow the House of Commons to override the House of Lords. But if you leave the ECHR, if you leave the European Convention on Human Rights, it might sound like, good, we could finally get rid of all those dangerous immigrants. But just like Patrick was saying earlier, what are rights? Are they specific, or are rights?
Yep. Are they privileges?
Are they specific? Are they privileges? But they apply to everybody. Yep. They don't apply to they don't apply to just one person. If there's a right to free speech, it isn't free speech in Shropshire, but not in London.
Yeah.
It's free speech everywhere. So I have the Convention on Human Rights, wrong tab. I have the Convention on Human Rights right here. And these are the things that if you pull out of the...
Yeah, what kind of wacky, woke, Marxist liberal nonsense is in this? What kind of human rights are they giving to just anybody these days, Chris?
The obligation to respect human rights.
Okay.
The right to life.
What? Well, that's just wokery.
Prohibition of torture.
Well, clear nonsense by overeducated leftists.
Absolutely. Prohibition of slavery and forced labor. Right to liberty and security. Right to a fair trial. No punishment without law. You cannot be held guilty of a crime if there's no law against it when you did it.
Oh.
Right to respect for private and family life.
Well, that's actually relatively reasonable.
Freedom of thought, conscience, and religion.
Ah.
Freedom of expression. That's your freedom of speech, by the way.
Yeah, okay, but that's not actually woke nonsense.
Freedom of assembly and association.
Huh.
Right to marry.
That sounds American.
I know. Right to an effective remedy. That's if you are in court, you have the right to get out of it, or at least complain about it.
Oh, so like the rule of law, as some of us call it, those conservatives, I suppose.
That's right.
Yeah.
So basically, there's even one in here about the restriction of political activities of aliens. It means that I can't go into your country causing a ruckus. Right.
My God.
So I mean, so it's not just this big woke lefty document that says everybody's got to put a daisy in their hair.
Yeah.
It's basically how countries can protect themselves and protect their people. Yeah. And if it's a huge tenet of the Reform Party and now and also the Conservative Party, some members of the Conservative Party, to get rid of this thing.
It's worth asking which parts of it they're gunning for, because nothing that you just read out there sounds to me like something that we can do without at all, you know?
And what do they want to replace it with? A British Bill of Rights.
Okay.
Who gets to write it?
I really want to know what those rights are before we get rid of the European Convention on them.
And so this is kind of the warning for the UK, because we're dealing with this in America, but we have a legal framework that prevents kind of immediate drastic change. That framework doesn't exist in the UK.
Yeah.
So when somebody says we're going to leave the ECHR, that means they're going to walk away from the system that guarantees your freedom of speech, and they're going to replace it with something that they want.
Yep.
And they're going to replace it potentially on the backs of 32% of the vote.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, that the British political system, because it is a weird mixture of first past the post, without the unifying, like, sort of existence of a presidency to force the creation of a two-party system, you end up with the possibility for real balkanization, where a 33% margin or a 33% vote share can give you a massive majority. And so all of a sudden, the super majority of the country can find itself being dictated to by a relative minority.
By an absolute minority.
Yeah.
I mean, for less than a third of the people. And it just depends on how the vote breaks down. Now, there are two kind of final problems here. First, how does Labor, Conservatives, all parties deal with this? Because right now, the Labor Party is doing what the Conservative Party did and trying to occupy the space on the right.
Yeah, sort of. We'll be reform light on this. You know, we'll hate the immigrants, but not as much.
We'll hate the immigrants, but we won't shoot the.
We'll hate them reasonably. We'll hate them, without being so, gosh darn mean about it.
Yeah.
How does that work, Chris? Is that a real vote getter, do you think, in your experience?
No, it's not a real vote getter, because you can't outright the right. You can't out crazy.
Yeah,
right.
That's true. If you're in the market for real proper hatred, you're probably not going to go for the hatred with the smile party, because that's not the deal.
If somebody's walking around outside naked, you can't get more naked.
That is true.
You could take off your shirt, you could take off your pants, but you can't get more naked than the crazy person walking outside naked. And people might be looking at that person. People might say that person's got a lot of good ideas, and they probably won't listen to you when you say, "Why are you so obsessed with this naked person running around outside?" But
look at me, I'm just as naked, but I'm wearing clothes.
Look at me, I'm still wearing my underwear. Well, you're not as naked as the other guy. I'm still looking at this naked person over here. They got a lot to say.
Yeah. No,
right? They have your attention. It's
a weird belief, and it seems like this is not a problem that's isolated in the United Kingdom. It seems like that was a similar problem that we see in Germany, with some attempts by the Christian Social Union and the Christian Democratic Union,
CDU-CSU.
Yeah, exactly.
The
weird conjoined twins of German center-right partydom, attempting to sort of, deal with the rise of
the
AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, like to sort of, occupy their space. And instead of meaning that means they get all the voters from AfD, instead what ended up happening was that they basically said to everyone in Germany, oh yeah, the AfD, they've got some great ideas, but they're just too much of a muchness. Yeah, and that's not actually a winning formula, it seems.
And basically what it comes down to is that you have to provide people with a better life, and the reason Labor is losing is because they spent the first 10 months of their government taking money away from poor people and old people, almost exclusively, and then they're surprised people aren't voting for them, and it's just nonsense.
I mean, the thing is, I understand the economic political theory behind it, right?
Yeah,
because the idea is, if you want to sort of get Britain in a better place, number one, you've got to get interest rates down. And that means convincing the money markets and, the people who hold capital and invest in Britain that, you're not going to inflate your way out of your debts. You're not going to, have a problem paying those things off. You're not going to pull a Liz Truss and self-destruct the entire economy. And that means being able to show, oh, yes, no, we are paying off our debts. We definitely we're not going to borrow too much money. We're not going to be crazies. And that means you can invest with us safely. And that hopefully means that you invest at a lower interest rate because we don't have a risk premium to pay off, a moron premium to pay off, right?
Yeah, of course.
So that makes sense to me. However, and if you can pull it off, right, it means you're paying less on the interest, and that means there's more money you can spend on social issues. That's more money that you can spend on the military. That's money you could conceivably offer in tax cuts. You can have some fun with it, right? The problem is that I don't think there's the money to be got from poor people on account of they don't have money. And it seems like Britain's in a position to be able to raise some taxes on the better off, who can afford it.
Outrageous heresy.
I know. I'm a crazy, woke lefty Marxist, obviously, for even suggesting such a thing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's just amazing to me that Labour is in power and they're doing the deeply unpopular thing and not providing a strong narrative to back it up, and then are suddenly finding themselves at a loss to explain why they're losing elections.
Losing seats, and then trying to jump down the rabbit hole of being more right wing than the right wing.
Yeah.
So basically, we could be looking at the beginning of a massive political realignment at best.
Yeah.
At worst, we could be, on the ground floor of authoritarian Britain. And so, we're going to wrap it up here.
Yeah. On that lovely, relaxing thought.
Well, we're not specifically done because we don't like to wrap it up on something bad. But, again, the best way to deal with this stuff is to inform yourself, listen to podcasts like ours, read Ground News.
Exactly.
Don't just take what the television tells you for granted. And also remember that most people won't study politics like this. And so if you talk to somebody, you don't have to be mean to them. There are people who vote for reform, and because they saw Nigel Farage on the billboard, they said that guy has the right cut.
Yeah.
So we're going to vote for that guy, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. So talk to them and try, because that's the antidote to fascism. It's just constant small conversations.
Yeah. Just reminding people that what they see on the television, what they see on the internet, it's not everything. That's not everything that exists in the world.
Yeah. That's a little snapshot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hopeful line.
Hopeful enough, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for listening. And as always, I'm Dr. Silverstein.
I'm Dr. Armshaw.
And we are doctors,
but not doctors.
Good night.